Anybody else have any comments or questions? We'll move on to item number 2, approval of the minutes. Do we have any changes or anyone have any comments on that? Have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
I'll second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll abstain. Steve.
Have 2 there. Discussion and public hearing on the re-subdivision of parcel 29-44, tax map 142 MD, Ivy Gate Lane in Park Place subdivision to modify platted building envelopes zoned R-4, 2.37 acres, Park Place Land Holdings LLC applicant.
In your packet is a reduced copy of the subdivision plat. Now, this is immediately behind the town hall. The walking trail that's connected to our Admiral Farragut Memorial ties back into this property line. And the original plan with this development was to have rear entry garages. And given the wetland location and with the proximity to the town hall and logistically of building the houses, the builder is opting to eliminate one of the lots and rearrange so that these are front entry garages on this end of the development. Per the subdivision regulations, require that 75% of the property owners sign off in agreement with this change, and they have submitted all the signatures verifying that agreement. And staff is recommending approval of the plat subject to the items that are listed at your place in the staff recommendation list, just ensuring that the 20-foot walkway easement is outside the required buffer, adding some additional dimensions, ensuring that one of the lots meets the minimums of those square footage, just indicating on the building, on the footprints where the garages, which side they will be, and then submitting a letter of credit and meeting all town requirements.
Is anyone with the applicant here?
Yes, I'm David Harden, the surveyor for this project here.
And can you give us your address too, please?
My address is 4334 Paper Mill Drive in Knoxville. Just one question. There's a good chance that this walking trail will be installed pretty soon before the plat's recorded. And just to make sure if the walking trail is installed, there will be no need for the bond in after that. So.
Correct.
Okay.
So they want to, the letter of credit is purely to ensure the completion of the walking trail. And if the walking trail is completed, then they would not have to post that letter of credit. And if they choose not to eliminate the island in the middle of the screen where it says Ivy Gate Lane, they're going to with backing cars up, is that there may be a conflict with the application, but Gerald was hoping that with the wider driveway that they will be able to remove that design accordingly, so they may opt not to do that.
And you're also all right with all the other requirements on it?
Yes, we are. All 2-car garages.
Gerald is the original builder for the other houses. Just that went through bankruptcy and rebuy and that sort of thing. But Gerald was back involved as he was the builder before. He was never the developer. He was back in there now that it's being reactivated.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Anyone in the audience? Have a motion?
I'll move for approval.
Second.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 4, discussion and public hearing on the site plan for maintenance building at the wastewater treatment facility, 1051 Concord Road, parcel 37.01, tax map 153, zone agriculture, 35.22 acres versus first applicant.
Most of you are familiar with where the wastewater treatment facility is located on Concord Road. And this is an aerial photograph of the facility. Now this particular site plan goes through a different process than privately owned piece of property. And I included the section of the Tennessee Code annotated of 13.4.104 explaining the process that we go through. And this is also an entirely different kind of development than we have anywhere else in town from the standpoint of it is a fenced area and you aren't allowed into the premises without going through the gate and that sort of thing. And so the overall property is about 35 acres and the area that they are building the building is in the middle of this large concrete pad. So they are not disturbing any green area on the property at all. And the facility is a maintenance facility, and then it's going to be surrounded by employee parking and by equipment parking for storage of their large equipment. Normally, if somebody doesn't want to or can't meet some of the requirements that are established in the zoning ordinance, the appeals process is through the Board of Zoning Appeals, and that is also spelled out in the state law. In this particular case, however, because this is a utility district, their process is for you all to take action, and if they can't or choose not to comply with some aspects of our regulations, it is their board that actually makes the final decision, and that's how the state law is written. And so, in this particular case, and at the staff recommendation, we've included a list of outstanding items, and the first items are dealing with fire hydrant information, which is kind of ironic because it's first utility district, but we still want to make sure in the event of a fire that people are protected. So, and then that also goes with the certified address from MPC. Oftentimes when we deal with larger complexes like this, MPC will assign different addresses for different buildings or different areas on the site, so that in the event of an emergency, and obviously if it's a fire, they're going to figure out where it is, but if it's someone that's had a heart attack, they want to know which building to go to, and so MPC may assign a different address, so they are actually looking into that. And as I've noted in the comments, that they have agreed to comply with those areas of our ordinances, and they will be giving us that information. The areas of our ordinance that they are not going to comply with are in landscaping the islands around the ends of the building. As I already pointed out, this is in the middle of a large concrete pad, so there's a reason why they're not. They're just putting the building in the middle of the concrete pad. And also that they have the minimum parking space width of 9.5 feet is what is in our ordinance, and because they are accommodating employees only, and this is in a secured facility, it has plantings along the lake where it's kind of screened from folks that are on the lake and from residents on the other side of the lake. They are choosing not to add landscaping around the building and landscape islands. And so as I explained in a letter to them, and as we talked about at the staff developer meeting, you all do not have the authority to approve something that doesn't fully comply with the zoning ordinance. But at the same time, they have complied with the bulk of it, and we appreciate First Utility District working with us, they always do. But we still have to, as staff, have to recommend denial. This is a friendly denial. Just want to clarify that one. Because this is the process that we have to follow through for the Tennessee Code annotated. It is required by law to come before you for review. And we all serve the same customers. They have a larger customer base than we do, but ultimately we do serve the same customers. And they have been very cognizant of that with the landscaping along the lake and that sort of thing, with the rest of their development. We have seen site plans from them come through here when they did their expansion a few years ago with all of their facilities, and they complied with all the setbacks and everything. In this particular case, the site plan so that it can follow the process that's spelled out in the state law.
Someone with the applicant here?
Jason Hunt, Canada, Canada, 8550 Kingston Pike.
Troy Ledger, First Building.
Thank you all for coming. Does anybody have any questions for them? Any comments? Do you all have anything to add or? That you'll process on with us.
Yes, that's correct. As best we can.
Yes, sir. Well, I understand from what Ruth, what we're saying, this is merely a procedural process. Because we
Well-
don't have authority to do what they want, and they have authority to do it.
Part of the reason that this is in the state law, well, this is the reason it's in the state law, is really for public notification, so that, that the public has an opportunity to participate in the process. Like I said, we serve the same customers, and so the idea is that the public has, let's say this was a different setting, and there was a neighborhood right next door, and, you know, the idea is that it creates a forum for people to see what's going on, to offer their input, and to work things out, so that they're a good neighbor. I think they have taken steps to be a good neighbor, with all their actions in the past, and even, you know, with this one.
That's not really my question.
But, well, I'm kind of going on with why the purpose of this is. The purpose of this is that coordination in general of utility districts with municipalities, that they're not doing something that's contrary to the process that's behind us, that we're going through the land use plan and everything. And that, in some of the cases, you know, Troy has been before you before with water lines and sewer line work that they're gonna do. For example, one that was fairly recently was the work that was on Turkey Creek Road, that they don't tear up Turkey Creek Road 2 weeks after we have resurfaced it, so that we don't have a waste of public funds, for making improvements and that kind of thing. So, that's the purpose of why we, the planning commission, reviews it. But it's also, with your question of they can do whatever they want, well, that's sort of true, but their board also serves the same customer.
My question was strictly procedural question. Is that the planning commission just technically couldn't approve it if we wanted to?
Correct, you cannot prove something that does not meet the minimum requirements of the regulations.
So
That's why it's a friendly denial, because
Well,
in this particular case, in this
Just want-
particular setting, what they're doing makes sense,
right.
but
I guess what my point is that I want to make it clear that this is a procedural thing, that we concur with what they're doing.
Troy, will this still make you eligible for a building permit when you guys are ready to pull a building permit, once this goes through your board? And maybe this is a question also for Ruth. Once they're, I wonder if we're just getting into more mud later on. At the end of the day,
this
are
does
they
not, this
required?
does not affect anything with regards to that.
Okay, so maybe they're not even, maybe they don't have to have a building permit from us when they do build the building.
That's our position.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions or comments? I have a motion.
I'll go ahead and make the motion that we move to deny site plan because of the above referenced outstanding items.
Second.
All those in favor of denying, say aye. Aye. Oppose? So we have denied your motion. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for smiling.
We should fill in the other shots. Move on. We move on to item number 5, discussion request to amend the Farragut zoning ordinance to create a new 4-story commercial zoning district. Myers Brothers Holding applicant.
Madam Chairman, in the interest of full disclosure, I would like to disclose that I am a partner in Myers Brothers Holdings. I would like to participate in the discussion, however, I will be abstaining from any voting related to our projects.
Thank you. And tonight, we are just discussing, there's no voting.
Clerk, we talk about doing that as our brother, not as a commission.
Yes.
In your packet, I included a summary of the discussions that Nick and Noah had with Mark Shipley and I with this request that they have. And the idea before us tonight is that they have, this is coupled with item number 6 on the agenda for the rezoning, and I'm gonna show the aerial photograph here, the property that's outlined. This is across from the Farragut Methodist Church, First Farragut Methodist Church on Way Station Trail there across from the Weigels. This is the location that they are looking at rezoning. They have simultaneously submitted a request for rezoning of the property, just so that you're familiar with where they're looking at this zoning district being applied for being applied. And so when we met with them, what they were looking for was reduced building setbacks, reduced and increased building height. And when we met with them and looking at the draft copy of the land use plan document and everything, we kind of put together some points of discussion, because starting from ground zero from your all's perspective could be kind of overwhelming in this. And so that's why I included the summary of this. Their goal with this, and you can see the boards in front of you, is to build a 4-story building that's more of an office type setting rather than a retail type setting. But since this area is on Kingston Pike, from our land use plan perspective, we're not really interested in it being solely an office zoning district. They did have the option of rezoning to 015 or something like that, and maybe make amendments to the 015 district. But in talking it over with what we're trying to accomplish as we've gone through this land use plan process, it seemed more appropriate to create a new zoning district that really targets different type of use. And so came up with the title business district. And as you go through the uses that are listed as permitted uses, these are much more less intense from an outdoor use. Generally recognized retail sales, but no outdoor sales and storage. That includes, because of the way our ordinance is written, alcohol is separated out. Financial and real estate services, professional, personal, and business services, restaurants, offices, medical, dental, veterinary, medical spas, adult education and training facilities, and I've added the term indoors only, because we don't want somebody doing tractor trailer training for adults kind of thing. But generally speaking, in all of our other districts, we have schools allowed, but in this particular district, we're not including schools, because the intent is that this is truly a business district rather than just kind of a general commercial district across the board. But adult education comes in a wide variety of forms, and so we didn't want to preclude that. Indoor theaters, indoor recreational facilities, and cultural activities. Cultural activities are defined in our ordinance, like museum, something like that, art museum. But I included at the bottom of the page everything that's excluded. That if you go through the office district and the general commercial district, that these are the uses that we've excluded: the outdoor sales and storage, sale, farm implement, drive-through coffee houses, automobile services, kennels, mortuaries, greenhouses, daycare facilities, nursing homes, elderly housing, churches, schools, play fields, outdoor play areas, outdoor idea with this is that it be more of a business, rather than a general commercial, so that its uses are more, homed in. And then, one of the things we talked about, across the board, our other commercial districts have a 70% lot coverage. And the idea was would be to have a reduced lot coverage because you're going up in height, you have more green space around, so it'd be 60% rather than 70%. And then, we also talked about that development should incorporate a minimum of one of the following low-impact development practices. Now, I know that we have a couple new people on the commission that weren't on the commission when Jason Scott did a presentation, I guess it was last Christmas, or last December, or maybe, might have been even 2 Decembers ago, about low-impact development thing, which includes impermeable pavers, rain gardens, green roofs, bioswales, bioretentions, rainwater harvesting, natural area preservation. Some of these we've done out at McPhee Park, just so that you're familiar with some of those. But this particular aspect of it is something that when we adopt our new stormwater ordinance, we'll have different rules in place in general. So this is something that we're including now, but we may come back at some point in time in the future and take it out depending on how the stormwater ordinance evolves. The next one is dealing with maintaining a 35-foot buffer strip. This is the exact same wording of what we currently have within the C1 district. That in this particular case, for example, it fronts on Way Station Trail, but what it fronts on Way Station Trail is wider, so there'd be no reason to include a buffer strip on Way Station Trail. But if there was a residence across on Way Station Trail, then it would be appropriate to have a buffer strip across the street on Way Station Trail. But then the other issue is the building setbacks, and I'm going to kind of come back to that because that's really going to be a big piece of what we discussed tonight with everything. And then we would maintain what is defined in our zoning ordinance, perimeter parkway, and of 20 feet in the front yard and 10 feet in the side rear. That's the green strip that's between parking lots, that's between the rights of way and side properties and everything. And then going with the maximum building height of 4 stories, and we will spend a little bit more time on that later. I just kind of wanted to go over all of this so you kind of get a feel for kind of what we're shooting for with this particular zoning district. And because of the architectural aspects that when you're dealing with a more intensive land use, cross-referencing the Title 14, Chapter 3 of our municipal code dealing with the town center district design requirements, eventually the town has talked about that they want to incorporate architectural review. But we're not there yet, and these guys have a client that is interested in doing this sooner than later. But they also feel that architectural aspects of control is important. And so just tying into these sections of the municipal code, it's a subjective ordinance rather than an objective ordinance, so that it isn't something that, where it's either they need it or they don't. It isn't kind of decide, well, I like that, I don't like that, and kind of think about which you like the best kind of thing. And then that ties into requiring the HVAC units to be screened, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, mechanical units. But that not only that they're screened for our ordinance, but that the screening be architecturally compatible with the buildings themselves. And then following current requirements dealing with lighting, parking, that sort of thing, and the sign ordinance. And the one of the things that isn't in here is possibly talking about screening or parking lot or something like that. But that's kind of a quick rundown of the outline of the ordinance for you, just to kind of give you an idea of what we were thinking when we talked about it. Does anybody have any questions before I kind of go back to the building setback issue? Because that part of this?
Yes, the center part.
Yes, that's why I wanted to kind of gloss first and then go back to it. Anybody have any questions? The building setbacks that they are requesting is a 20-foot building setback from all property lines and access easements. So that means side, rear, and front property lines. And then 100 foot from residentially and agriculturally zoned land. The 100 feet is based on the 100-foot buffer that we had on Parkside Drive, which backs up to Sweetbriar. So that's where that 100 feet came from. But as part of the 20-foot property line setback, this is really not a staff decision, and so my role tonight here is not to judge, make a value judgment on any of this. It's really to make you guys think, so that when you leave here tonight, and you go out and you look at different properties, and you go out and you look at things, that you decide what you want. And so my role tonight is really just to throw things out at you to make you think. And I know that Nick and Noah can answer questions, because that's part of, we've gone through this process. This one, only a couple of you were around when we did the town center district, so this is kind of the same format that we did, only we've already kind of created that, so this is a whole lot more condensed discussion, because it's a little bit different, because this is still suburbia, as Farragut is, but it's more intense development than what we have in regards to height. The front yard setback points of discussion, there's 20 feet is the size of the parking space. Our parking space requirement length is 19.5 feet. That gives you an idea of distance. So often, and staff is guilty of this, we look at a site plan and the dimensions, you lose the dimensions on the little drawing, and you forget what it really means out in the field. So go out and measure 20 feet so that you have an idea of what 20 feet means. And then one of the things that we have talked about repeatedly is that we want to encourage something other than parking lots in our front yards of our buildings in town. And allowing buildings to be located closer to the roads does that. We amended our ordinance, our general commercial and our regional commercial zoning districts a few years back, because we used to have a front yard and rear yard combination that you had to meet. So it allowed your building to kind of float around, but it really still went like this being the front, this being the back, kind of went back and forth. Where then we took that combined total away so that the building could actually be oriented this way with parking on the side. And that's what J.C. Penney took advantage of. And so that is the advantage of having a reduced property line setback. And a lot of the pictures that are back as part of the comprehensive plan shows these ideas and that sort of thing. But then there's other things to think about when we go through this process, about the fact that if you have a 20-foot building setback from a front property line, if there are above ground power lines, the utility pole is usually 1 foot into public right of way. So if you have a T-shaped utility pole, how does that affect the aesthetics and the proximity to a building with the above ground power lines being that close to the buildings? So that's something to take into consideration when you're thinking about this. The other thing to think about is that when you have a smaller front yard is the limited ability to plant shade trees between the building and the edge of the road. Now, we don't have above ground power lines all over on both sides of our arterials and collectors. So sometimes there would be a utility line conflict. Sometimes it's not the above ground utility conflict with planting trees, it's the underground utilities with planting trees on top of water. Don't want to, plant large trees on top of water lines or sewer lines or something like that. Then the other issue is the proximity of building closer to the road could potentially affect future roadway improvements to arterials and collectors. This, to me, is really where the planning commission has to think about it from, and this is why this isn't a staff issue, this is part of tying into that land use plan and where you see your town going in the future. Right now, Kingston Pike is a 5-lane road. Do we anticipate Kingston Pike being widened at some point in time? Maybe not just widened for additional lanes of traffic, but widened to accommodate bike lanes and things like that, other modes of transportation. But if you put a lot of buildings closer to the road, you preclude a future improvement. That's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just that you have to think about that in the realm of how that all fits together. Right now, Kingston Pike, Campbell Station Road, those are major barriers to cross when you're a pedestrian. You better move fast, otherwise you're not going to make it all the way across. So, there's the other aspect of that. Do you want 7 lanes of traffic bisecting the town, for Kingston Pike? But there are other aspects, like I said, with adding bike lanes or other modes of transportation. The other thing to consider is confined space for a walking trail. Our standard walking trail easement is 20 feet, but the right-of-way, that isn't just 20 feet in which that walking trail is. That's actually the green space in there. That's kind of just so that I recommend you go somewhere where you're on a walking trail that's closer to a building, so you just get a feel for it, more just to make you think about it than anything. But I know that Nick and Noah probably have some things to add with regards to that. But like I said, this is really for you all to decide. I'm kind of just throwing a bunch of ideas at you for you to think about and ask questions about. I'm done.
Does the applicant, and you have some comments you'd like to make at this time?
Well, I need to introduce myself first. My name is Nick Myers Brothers Holdings, and our office is 1274 Kingston Pike. First time, want to tell you all I appreciate the opportunity to be here. We were excited about the project that we have in front of us. To give you just a little bit of background about the Renaissance, there were originally 11 pieces of property out there that over a substantial amount of time we acquired to create kind of what you see the beginnings of today. And what we're attempting to accomplish with this building was something that in our really, really early drawings were there in 2004, 2005. We actually took them off because we knew then and even today that there's not a zoning district available to Kingston Pike as is that accommodates what we're attempting to do. However, we don't, we still believe, as we did years and years ago, that this is the highest and best use for the community. And so I just really wanted to open up with that because it is part of the bigger picture. The Renaissance development as a whole is about a 29-acre development. And I think that what we have out there speaks for itself. I know you all are going to have a lot of other questions, so I think that's probably the best place to start.
Anyone have any questions for either Ruth or Nick at this point?
Well, I guess I have a question. And since this is a zoning issue for pertains to other locations, when you're looking at the line here along Kingston Pike, setback being 20 feet. Comes back to widening Kingston Pike in the future. Is the probability that it can happen, or
Daryl nor I participate in the widening of Kingston Pike during our professional careers, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it wouldn't be during our lifetime, from the standpoint of traffic increases and traffic counts and things like that. Because we are on the west end of Farragut, I would anticipate widening of Kingston Pike more likely to occur closer in, because we're looking at doing a dual left turn lane up here at Kingston Pike at the Young Station Road intersection, and doing some improvements in that area just because of the traffic count. Obviously, whenever you do any kind of public improvement to a road, it's kind of dependent on need, but also a big part of it's dependent on money. And so, and that's why the bike lane may be a different aspect of it rather than widening it to 5 lanes.
Ruth, can I add something? That I think that, obviously, we spent a great deal of time with staff talking about how to do this, 20 feet, 15 feet, 2 feet. There was a lot of talk about not having any. But one of the things that I think is important to help you all put it into perspective, the edge of curve on Kingston Pike, where there's not a decel lane, okay, is approximately 20 feet from the right of way. So you're building, assuming, we got to where we build the 20 foot, we actually proposed it at 22, but you're at 40 feet from where the outside of curb is today.
I guess what I'm getting, point that I'm getting at is that in the future, probably far out, that you don't want to have to condemn that property, go to the highway. See, reasonably considerable.
You're absolutely correct. I mean, we, when you look out and think that, what could possibly be proposed 25 or 50 years, I mean, it's difficult to just get your arms around that. My thoughts were that if Kingston Pike was going to be widened to 7 lanes for whatever reason, I would think that due to the traffic counts and where you might expect them to be, that they would start that process towards where the congestion is. And so obviously when they get outside of the town of Farragut, headed east towards Knoxville, there are lots of things they're going to have to do. And to help, kind of one other thing that we did, and went out and kind of stood on it and walked on it, and because it was there, is when we redeveloped OTS, you remember where OTS used to be? There's still a building there, of course, but it's on a 20-foot setback from the right of way. Now there's a decel lane that pulls into it, and that's 12 foot plus the curb and gutter. But it's still, it's a distance. I mean, I was out there until last week, had to adjust the sprinkler system. You have, but one of the things maybe, maybe say you don't have a 20-foot setback where there is a decel lane. So you maintain that space from the edge of curb. Because the right of way is this invisible line that people don't see.
My biggest concern question has to do with setback relative to this four-story commercial zone. It's not so much tied to widening of Kingston Pike, not really, it's no risk anywhere near term. Near term, 30 to 50 years. To me, this thing's that
community, you know, where people are paying attention, you
Usually that's possible.
slow down.
I don't see that.
I remember. I know. I understand. I mean, and I think it's something for the town. It's obviously new, and I remember, and I think you were on the planning commission when we proposed the traffic calming in Vista, and there was this huge resistance that why would we, you know, do that, and you know, and of course now there is traffic calming all over. Yes, and in some way is a traffic calming. It is creates definitely a different feel, and you know, instead of having what we call a sea of asphalt between where, you know, otherwise our alternative is to scoot the building to the back and have a more traditional thing that we already have on this side.
I must say, all four not having parking on private sides. I'm just pushing the dimensions given future code. And that's all that all comes down to just cost.
Madam Chairman, can I make a statement on behalf of the applicant? One thing I think that we need to put in perspective is we're dealing with a 100-foot right-of-way and approximately about 60 feet of asphalt in that right-of-way. So, and if Darrell was here, I think he could probably explain a little bit better than I can. But even within that 100 feet of right-of-way that's there, there's room to expand lanes to Kingston Pike within the existing right-of-way, whether we're going to expand drive lanes or we're going to expand, put bike lanes in. There's already room there today to do that. And I think, quite frankly, if you wanted to go to 7 lanes, I think there's room to do 7 lanes within the 100 feet of right-of-way. I think that's something that I wanted for everybody to understand. When you're looking at this aerial photograph, it's kind of difficult to see, well, where's the right-of-way, where's the edge of curb, where's the sidewalk, and what sometimes is easy to forget is to put it in perspective is, again, we're basically 40 feet back from the edge of the asphalt to where the building would be. So there is room to grow. Now, if the state of Tennessee decides to put in a interstate where Kingston Pike is, then the town of Farragut has other problems besides our 100-foot right-of-ways, which pretty much exist all of the distance of Kingston Pike. There might be some old grandfather properties that still go out to the middle of Kingston Pike if they've been under the same ownership for a long time. But most of those, as properties have changed hands, most of the time the right-of-ways have been adjusted to that 100 feet of width. And that's designed to be 50 feet from the center line to either side. Occasionally Kingston Pike meanders a little bit to the center line of one side or the other. But for all intents and purposes, basically you got 60 feet of asphalt with Kingston Pike. That's all your 5 lanes. Your center lane's a little bit wider than your 2 outside lanes. And then you got roughly 20 feet to the edge of where the right-of-way is. And so if Kingston Pike was widened to 9 lanes, that could be a problem. If an interstate was put in, that could be a problem. But I think there is a lot of what-ifs that could happen that are going to affect a lot of other things in the town of Farragut besides this. What was important to us and our client with this particular project was to de-emphasize the parking lot, put the focus on the building. And it was important to Nick and I, and real important to our client, that this is a brick building. This brick building is going to look good 100 years from now. This style of architecture came from photographs off of buildings that are 100 years old. The intent is for the building to be timeless. And so we felt like that in effort to gain some things that are not otherwise available under the zoning districts, as they're spelled out in our municipal code, we were willing to give up some things and do some things that are above and beyond. For instance, giving up an additional 10% of the property and make that additional 10% of the property pervious versus impervious. So reducing our impervious, our environmental footprint, if you will, from 70% to 60% is a big deal. the architectural restrictions are a big deal to me personally. I was a big advocate of that when we worked on it with the planning commission. It ended up going to the board mayor Alderman, at least our first draft of our very first one, it had to do with the metal siding, and it kind of stalled. But I think this is a great start for somebody that would want to come in and utilize this zoning district. And that's really what I like to look at under this agenda item. It's not necessarily at Renaissance, but what other areas this zoning district could apply. There are a lot of hoops to jump through that you would have, commitments that you would have to make, whether it's the low impact development practices, whether it's the architectural review, whether it's the impervious surface. There's a lot of things to make somebody say, you know what, that's a great way of having some flexibility and creativity with design and de-emphasizing the parking lot and emphasizing the building. There's some extra things that I gotta do, but everybody wins. The town of Farragut and the community wins. Yes, sir.
Bruce, could you take the view from Kingston Pike, look at you at the northwest corner, I think it's one of the sheets lower left side, can you project that on the screen? I can see.
I can do that, yes. I would like to point out, one of the things Noah mentioned was that, when we, with the building setback, we actually, how our building is set back, measured is from the center line of Kingston Pike. It is not from, I mean, we have the setback stated from the, property line, but when the property, or when the lot does not meet the minimum requirements of the right-of-way for the, the 100-foot right-of-way, for example, in this particular case, then it does have to meet that as if there is 100 feet of right-of-way. So even if the property were to develop and there was only 80 feet or 40 feet to center line in front of their particular property, the setback would be the same as to whether it were 50 feet of right-of-way on the center line. Does that kind of explain? Yeah, where is it that you want to move that?
No, I'm talking about the red, he's talking about
That's right here.
Ruth, you see the
Oh, the red.
second rendering panel, but the lower left part of the render, the view.
This one?
No, this is,
On the floor, more on, that actually is to scale. That does show the proximity from the building to the sidewalk and to the edge of the curb.
Okay, this one. Okay.
But I wanted to address a question, because I know you looked at this, and this really gets back to my key point, of there's so much, it's tremendous about this, but the key point, and also in the context of Richard Berry's zone, is that, you can see where this car that's kind of in the middle is coming out of the Renaissance, and the blue car on the left is Kingston Pike. I talk about scale and setback, proportionality. That's why I talk about the wall effect. The architectural features are great there, but the real architectural feature is on the other side of the building, the big entrance, very attractive. It's that wall effect, proportionality, and setback. And I'd ask you, if you had a deeper piece of property, would you set it that close to the road? I don't think you would.
Absolutely.
I know how you, I don't know what you think, but I guess in my heart of hearts, I think, no, we set it back further. Because that wall effect is what started to do something generic in the story.
We have, with the exception of the height limitation, we have the ability to shove it all the way to the back of the site, but then we're stuck with the same old development that we've always gotten. A building in the back and a big parking lot between Kingston Pike and the building. What we're trying to do is do something a little outside the box, do something that other progressive communities have embraced as a way to de-emphasize the parking lot and emphasize the architecture. I agree, it's a tall
We're
building.
trying to emphasize the parking lot versus the building. Still have, right next to property, you can still put the setback, you can still have the parking side. So this is a somewhat shaped, everything's, people's views are kind of around the concept that you present, and the piece of property that's tailored to. I'm assuming the people that look at the wall effect at Kingston Pike say, is that really what we want to see? change or positive change. I don't personally think it's a positive change to have it that big, that close to Houston, like in this community. I see things like that in other major cities. I don't have a problem with the 4 stories, it's the proportionality of Houston Pike. And I don't want to cast a big rock at it by contrast, but always think in terms of, the concepts and architecture and size and proportionality. On the grossest situation, it is truly gross, and I'm not trying to compare this to you. This is just, hey, you can see the firework building at Blocks Road, it's just a big, huge white block. The lights, there's a certain just starkness to it, just the size and proportion, much less it's, you wouldn't see it all the way it's decorated or everything else. But I've been to other places where we can, we also want to emphasize, the green part of this. That was being eliminated. So it's that wall effect and generic zoning change. I don't know if y'all got some examples of other buildings of this type, that close to the road, that maybe you can look at and get a feel for it. I mean, one thing with the rent, I feel comfortable looking at the rent.
But
Live with the plans. But it's over 40 years, but not everybody has. But there were real examples, people look at that. That's a choice of the community feels that way. Fine, but that's my concern with this generic change to the zone.
Well, it is. We're not talking just about Renaissance. We're talking about other properties that this zoning district could be applicable within the town limits. But I think something that to take into consideration, which was kind of exciting when we've been part of the land use plan, and we've had our public feedback, and we've had some open houses where the public would come in and they would take their dots and they put it on all these photographs. And if some of you participated in this process, you'll remember it was amazing when you saw these buildings. When you saw multi-story buildings close to the road, those are the ones that got all the dots that people got excited about, versus when you see the strip malls that are pushed back with a sea of asphalt out front of the building.
Kind of pictures of what that is. And then a lot of those pictures were in a very commercial area. So now, a lot of those were also, in our campus specifically, were kind of off-key. Back more toward, the high school, intermediate school. Not up on the front, right necessarily right at the road. And also, and similarly in other places, yes, we accommodated some, thank you. It was also a little kind of different location.
I'll offer some commentary. First of all,
And I don't want to say, or 99.9%.
No, I know. This is what it's about. I mean, all this discussion is obviously very important. And so remember, I'm taking my planning commissioner hat and putting my applicant hat on. So it's okay.
Well, this is the best part of being on the planning commission, when we get to discuss something new for our community. As I look at this, even though this is a scale, we try to give some people some distance. If you want to get a 40-foot distance, the wall behind me, to the wall back there with the shelf on the clock on it, that's 40 feet, give or take 5 or 6 feet either way. And so I give you kind of a visual. You look at this in 2 terms that I use a lot. One in particular I think is appropriate for tonight in many of our discussions is evolution. And we have a lot of discussions of evolution in this meeting. New ways of designing, new ways of roads, buildings, landscaping, what have you. And I think this is an example that we've been very blessed over the years with numerous great developers approaching this board and the community as a whole saying, hey, here's something new, and that new oftentimes has turned out to be something special. Not every time, but oftentimes. It's one of the advantages we have also as a community is we can determine and can control to a great extent where we allow these types of buildings to go up through the zoning itself. Ruth has raised some issues that we do need to be aware of, and I really appreciate her doing that. And Commissioner St. Clair, who I have tremendous respect for, and normally 100% on the same page, has raised a concern that is valid as well. I don't share the concern in the sense that somebody mentioned earlier that this has the potential to be a bit of a calming effect. And I would wrap the term community around that as well. I think this would help identify our community as you side, which Renaissance itself has done that to a certain extent, but it is a side of our community that is we put emphasis on having quality entrances around town. This is a very important. It could have the sense of potentially creating some calm to slow traffic down, maybe not to a great extent, but nonetheless, I think it is there. But, when I look at this building, the term that comes to mind is majestic. And I think it would have that great entrance feel to our community. The wall effect could happen if we allow these types of buildings through zoning to become great in number in a short distance. But I think we have the ability to control it. We certainly don't have a polished product, and everybody does need to heed Bruce's thoughts and areas of potential concern. But personally, I think this has great potential for our community as a whole, but especially is creating a western gateway, if you will, into the town of Farragut.
Does anybody else have any more questions, comments? Is there anyone in the audience who has questions? Will you please come up to the microphone?
It's just a big comment.
Well, we need to know who you are.
Oh, my name is Connie Schmid. I'm a resident of Farragut. I was invited here tonight by Annette. Thank you, Annette. I think this is a fantastic building, and I listened to Ruth Hall. I don't know my picture. Please take my picture. This is what keeps me from coming here. Don't. I want to be in the paper. None of that. People don't come here because of that. I'm just telling you. So anyway, I listened to Ruth Hall talk about expanding the lanes on Kingston Pike to 7 lanes or whatever. And I've been reading and looking at that. And if we're going to go for a community, more urban area, do you want 7 lanes going through your town? I don't. I want a more urban area. I want something that has walking and parks, and I think this is a fantastic building. Yeah, right. But I don't want 7 lanes going down Kingston Pike. I would rather have buildings like this with access roads going behind them. And the gentleman, sorry, Edward? Can't read. If you look at the Tennessee Bank building in Turkey Creek, it's pretty close to the road, right? Fairly. And then the
Further back from this.
further back
Further
this way.
back.
And if you also look down by the town center where the new North Shore development is, there's buildings that are literally sitting right on North Shore. I think they look great. I think if we're trying to get a new look, if we're trying to get more of an urban area to bring in more shopping, more entrepreneurs, more boutique type things, I think this is the kind of look that you want instead of just those strip malls. I think the strip malls are dated. I think this has more of a classic look, which I think classic never goes out of style. I just think it's real nice. My 2 cents.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming. Yes. Come up to the microphone, please.
Good evening, I'm Fred Gibson, the president of the Old Stage Hills Homeowners Association. I love the building. I don't necessarily see how it fits on that corner right there. It does abut up to residential property right behind it. It's a great building. I love the idea you guys have western properties on the other side. I just don't see how putting that building right where it's at would be really good use of that land, judging that it does butt up to a residential piece of property. If any of you wanted to live in a 4-story building in your back, just beyond your backyard, think of it like that. We have a house right next to it. And the lights at night, right now the Renaissance, it's a nice bedroom community business area. It pretty much shuts off at night, but this right here will be 4 stories overlooking the whole neighborhood entrance. Like I said, I can see it not necessarily on that corner, 2 stories on the height. If it gets away from our neighborhood a little bit, that's one thing. That one corner where you're planning on putting that, I just can't see that working in the best interest of our community. Now, from a business standpoint, I can see it, but like I said, I'm looking out for my community, my neighborhood, and that overlooking our backyard is just, I can't see it working. So that's pretty much what I'd like to say.
Thank you.
One thing that we did with this is Nick actually met with the 2 homeowners, actually one homeowner that is on this corner on Way Station Trail. And under the existing zone, it would actually allow you to build a 35-foot tall building 35 feet from that existing property line of that homeowner. And what this new zoning district does is it actually takes and almost triples that setback to 100 feet. Now, we're actually well in excess of 100 feet here, so we've actually taken the building and pushed it absolutely as far away from the Old Stage Hills homeowners and Old Stage Hills entrance as possible on this side. Again, with the existing C1, you could actually take the building and push it all the way up to where Weigel's is. You couldn't build a 4-story building. You could build a 2.5-story building is what our existing ordinance calls for, which is up to a maximum height of 35. This is probably more like a 65-foot building. It's not twice as tall as what's allowed, but pretty close to it. And so we really have taken a lot of thought into that. I don't know if any of you get an opportunity, drive by Renaissance at night and look at the style of lights that we use at Renaissance. Those lights emit 0 glare. Those lights shine directly down. They do a great job when you're underneath them. As far as lighting up Renaissance from Kingston Pike, it doesn't do a good job, but that is what the intent of the dark sky ordinance is with the town of Farragut. The goal of that ordinance is not to allow any light to pollute any other adjacent right-of-ways or adjacent properties. So I think if you look at how the style of lighting that we use, which is required by the town of Farragut, that our lighting doesn't leave the town of Farragut, doesn't leave the Renaissance site, nor will this lighting. It is a heavily regulated ordinance that the staff is very involved in, electrical engineers are very involved in, and something that I wanted the homeowner, the president of the Old Stage Hills Homeowner Association to know is that this reduces the number of uses that are currently allowed on that property today. So a lot of things, whether it's outdoor sales or whether it's a coffee shop with a drive-through or a Crystal Burger, which is open 24 hours a day, is currently allowed to go on that site today under the existing zoning. But what we're proposing is to take those uses, a lot of those uses that we're talking about, and take those out of this zoning district, by basically reducing the amount of total uses. This building is a financial center building with a small banking component that will have banking hours. Again, this is not just about Renaissance. This is about the zoning district as a whole. And maybe those are additional things that we can look at as the zoning district as a whole. We've pretty much taken both agenda items, and we're talking about both agenda items pretty much at the same time. And so it is important to look at it as a zone for other commercial or office properties within the town of Farragut, and then look at its applicability to Renaissance. And I very much appreciate the President Homeowners Association's concerns, but I did kind of want to address some of those things. Number one, the light, and then number two, the use. All of a sudden, the uses that are allowed under C1 today that will go away, that will no longer be allowed with the new zoning district, and then all of a sudden, you're dealing with uses that are definitely not overnight uses, and they're definitely not 2 a.m. uses or 10 p.m. uses, really. Then they're not 5 a.m. uses. They're business hour uses, and that's something that we've kind of looked at as something that was important to us. We wanted to be able to dangle a carrot in front of a developer and say, hey, there are some additional things that you can do, but you're going to have to jump through some hoops. You're going to have to be willing to give up a few things. And if you're willing to give up some things, like impervious surface, architectural control, uses of your property, incorporating some low-impact development practices which aren't otherwise required today, then you can do these things. But again, this is a little outside of the box for Farragut. It's not outside the box for a lot of other communities, but it is a little outside the box for Farragut because we're just not used to this style. But when you talk to a lot of folks, it's an exciting style. And again, I understand and respect your concerns with the town, I mean, with this particular use. And matter of fact, Nick went door to door on the two homeowners. There's really one homeowner that abuts us. And then you went to the next homeowner and just talked to him and say, these are our thoughts, this is what we're thinking, this is our site plan, what are your concerns? And
Extremely positive.
Their reaction was very, very positive. And so, obviously, we would like to address any concerns that you have. And maybe there's something that we've overlooked in a component of this zoning district that would help address those things. But I think a lot of the meat that would resolve your concerns are probably already in here that has to do with the uses that would all of a sudden become disallowed, not permitted any longer.
I think one of my biggest
Can you please
issues.
come back up to the microphone, please? You also are, besides getting your picture made, you are on TV and they can't hear you.
One of my biggest concerns really was the lighting as well at night, because this is suburbia out in this area still. And we do kind of appreciate not having lights glaring at us. I can understand your concerns with if there were to be a crystal burger or anything else that would be a little bit obtrusive as well, but with this design in my hands right here, I can see what the distance is and the way this sets on the lot. I can see I might be a little bit more at ease with how it sits. So, in making sure that the light situation, that would really be my biggest concern then too.
Do me a favor, when you go home this evening, drive through Renaissance and look at the lighting that we use. I think you'll probably see that our lighting is the most least intrusive lighting that you're going to find anywhere in Knox County.
Right. This additional paperwork also shows the elevation, relative relations to the houses behind it. So I can take this to the neighborhood. I think I can be satisfied with this right here.
Thank you.
I'll take a look at it.
Please do.
Look forward to further meetings.
Nick, would you give your cards and comments? Questions?
I would like to make some comments, I'm writing some notes. With regard to the lighting ordinance, currently we do not restrict the height of wall-mounted lights. And that is a complaint that, when we're talking about the signage with regards to the taller buildings on Parkside Drive. And I think we haven't had a lot of tall buildings, so it hasn't been an issue. Costco worked with us very well with the wall-mounted lights, how high they would go with their lights, to take into consideration the Powell Acres folks. And I think simultaneously something that as we go through this process is to amend the lighting ordinance to restrict the mounted height of the wall lights. Because when you have a 4-story building, our ordinance currently just says if you have a wall-mounted light, it has to be shoebox style or something comparable, and it doesn't restrict the height. We just ask folks to work with us, and I don't doubt for a minute that they are not going to attach lights on the very top of this, but at the same time, they do at Parkside Drive, and that was one of the complaints that we got right after they opened. So I think it's something to take into consideration. Now there are decorative type lighting that you can do that would require a higher wall mounted light, I think. And then the other thing to clarify, and it isn't clarified, because when Noah was talking, I was like, oh yeah, it doesn't say, it doesn't really clarify it, but currently what we have is restaurants, tea rooms, cafes, coffee houses, or other similar establishments serving food or beverage that is primarily consumed within the principal building or in designated outdoor seating areas associated with the principal building. Because this is truly a business district, as Noah was explaining about the Target and everything like that, do we want to exclude or specifically say no drive-through restaurants?
Absolutely.
Because they're proposing as part of this is a drive-through bank. The banker's hours are not obtrusive. At least none of the banker's hours I've ever dealt with are obtrusive. Unless things change rapidly. So is that something that we want to specifically preclude from being part of this district?
Personally, I think if you put a drive-through restaurant what the intent of what we're doing here ruins it.
With respect to the lighting, a lot of times consider discussion of the exterior lighting of the parking lot. Well, to the exterior. The height of the building, on the glass, and other items, security standpoint, maybe some point, there's no operations, computer center type, or something like that, maybe some shit, something like that, inside. Maybe. What have y'all looked at relative to consideration? This is probably the first time we need kind of look at interior lighting and what you see. Especially the upper floors.
I mean, there's no doubt that if somebody's working late in an office, whether they're making phone calls or doing janitorial work, you're gonna have some parts of the building internally illuminated. It's hard for me to think that any light that goes through a glass creates any glare outside, but there's no doubt you can look at one office that's black at night, and you might have the office next door to it that has the lights on, and you'll be able to see that. I'm not sure that creates any light pollution beyond the building, but it is just like when your neighbor gets up at 2 a.m. and makes a cup of coffee, you can see the lights on. There's no doubt about it, you are going to see the lights on at night if somebody's in that building. We do not want any wall exterior light. What we would like to do is have well lights that are ground mounted that shine up on the building, that have a complete shield over them, that you do not see the bulb. All you see is some accent lighting on the building at night, but you never see the bulb. You never see the glare.
They currently have that on Renaissance, by the way, and it is very, I mean, when you're coming down the driveways on the hill and everything, we tweaked it as when they moved in and everything, that is part of our ordinance. There is, you can shine lights up, but you are not to see it from adjoining properties, driveways, or rights of way, so that is currently in our ordinance.
Mhm. It's basically, it's an accent lighting to accent the architecture of the building.
My question is kind of more specific use of your property, not.
Right,
So it's
right.
generic, what y'all looked at, and share whether it's a question about the operation, what the upper floors,
You're right, but it could, I guess if you had a call center, this particular use is not a call center, but I guess you could have a call center. If they're servicing the West Coast, they're going to be there late at night. If they're servicing China, they could be there all night. Think about my time zones for a second. So yes, that could. But what this was exciting to us about is that it was an opportunity to do an employment center that we otherwise wouldn't get because it wasn't applicable anywhere else in the town of Farragut. And so why it was exciting for us is that instead of having a multi-tenant building, which has been pretty much our MO, it's a single tenant building with two divisions of the same company within the building. One occupies about 80-85% of the building, and then the traditional banking functions is about 10 to 15% of the building. But they would have like a shared lobby, and then you'd have a bank of elevators, more like a traditional building, but or an office building like a doctor's office or something like that. But again, what we're looking at is we're kind of looking at it from the 10,000-foot view to look at it. Well, why is this zoning good for the town of Farragut? And then we're looking at the tighter view and saying, would this zoning be applicable to Renaissance? So, and those are kind of the two agenda items that we've been having dialogue with at the same time. Is trying to create something that's new and different that encourages some development practices that we really haven't been able to do. And most of that has to do with putting the parking lot back behind the building, using some architecture that we're real proud of. And I'm not going to pick on any particular buildings, but trying to do something a little bit different than maybe what's been done in Knoxville, Tennessee for the past 20 or 30 years. Now, 100 years ago, there's some really great architecture downtown Knoxville. And that architecture still looks good today. But the stuff we did back in the 80s and the 90s, I scratch my head at and think, what were we thinking?
Yeah.
And this gives us an opportunity, a stepping stone, to implement some architecture into a new zone and then give an incentive for a developer or a big corporate entity to do something a little bit different and jump through maybe a few more hoops they wouldn't otherwise have to jump through. But you get to do something that's exciting and emphasize some architecture for once instead of a big sea of asphalt.
You know, one of the, this is a little bit above and beyond the discussion we're having, but just to kind of look down the road is, this type of zone has great potential, I think, for the north side of Farragut as Outlet Drive gets finished. This could really be really create some great things. Just getting people to look a little bit beyond this, but again, I really like this. I agree with Noah with your most recent comments. I just think this is something, you know, we can polish, perhaps a little bit, review the issues that have been brought up. But I tell you, I think very highly of it, and I appreciate you bringing this to our community and to this board to give considerations.
Can I ask a question about the accessibility in the parking lot? First of all, how many parking spaces are there? You know?
I think that the way it's drawn today, there's 112, 115. It's above what is required, but it's mainly been driven by the client.
And I noticed that Ed South is they want to set up their headquarters here.
This
Is
will
that
be
true?
their headquarters,
How much of the building are they taking up?
all of it.
And how many employees is that? I'm trying, what I'm getting to is that in terms of getting in and out through this way station trail, I mean, when, you know, it's time the bell rings and people go home, having people line up to get out on the way station trail, there's no left turn lane for them on either side of this plot of land. And I was just wondering, is that something that is being considered to change?
Well, actually, there is a left turn lane at Renaissance, and so we would assume anybody going west is going to make a left turn on Kingston Pike. They would go west and use the Renaissance exit.
Is this an island here?
Yes, that is an island way station trail, and there are kind of more or less 2 lanes there.
I don't think they're striped. I don't think they're necessarily.
That entrance very
There's 2
much.
lanes, but they're not really striped. But nevertheless, it.
You can make it 2 lanes.
Right.
Well, you can't make it 2 lanes, or a light, I mean, is that another thing?
Well, that's, when they do come in with a site plan, they will have to do a traffic impact study as to whether a traffic signal would be required at that location. One of the things that, you know, the property on the north side of Kingston Pike is a large vacant tract, and whenever that develops, we would require that the access to that property would line up with way station trail, and very likely, if this development did not trigger the need for a traffic signal, which I don't know what kind of trip generation this particular thing would have, that I can't imagine it tipping it to really warrant that. But very high possibility that when the property on the north side develops, depending on what it develops as, that would trigger a traffic signal at that location, which part of it is triggered based on the amount of traffic coming out of the site, but also the traffic on Kingston Pike at those locations. The issue isn't brakes in there pulling out, the issue is speed and estimating that speed when you're pulling out, but really the volume isn't as such that you can't pull out at way station.
Or when people exit, like, you don't expect like a long line of people coming out, and then people coming in and out of the subdivision behind it. I just wonder, it just seems to me, seems very limited in terms of getting in and out if everybody is working the same hours and leaving at the same time. That's my only question.
I think in today's corporate culture, and again, we can't necessarily look at our particular client or our particular site, but in today's corporate culture, most large corporations that are progressive, like Ed South, they are using flex schedules. Some people come in at 7 and leave at 3. Some people come in at 8 and leave at 4. Some people come in at 9 and leave at 5. And so I think that the days of the manufacturers in a big factory ringing the bell and everybody shows up for 3rd shift, that's not applicable here. Again, we need to think on a grander scale and think with this zoning district and other things, but nevertheless, the trip generation, those are things that we deal with on every site plan that the Planning Commission reviews, whether it's a Costco, which obviously is going to generate a lot of trips, and then also triggered a couple of signals, or it's the Krispy Kreme donuts. which we spend a lot of time on thinking about their traffic ingress and egress. But I don't think in this particular scenario, and their number of employees, which actually is not necessarily that great, it's about 100 total, and you never have all employees there at one time. But you don't have I don't think we're gonna have the traffic generation that you're thinking, where there's gonna be any times of any backup.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're most welcome.
Ruth, do we, go on to item number 6?
Well, no, I actually want to talk about a few other things. I just knew that this was going to be probably the setback issue was probably going to generate the most discussion. And it's like I said earlier, my point, my goal was with initiating some of the things to get you all to think and encourage you all to go out in the next several weeks, look at various areas to see what you're comfortable. I meant to mention the building at North Shore there, just west of Pelican, and that's a good example. Compared to, given the setting of that building and the setting in Farragut, what Farragut is. Some of the things that I'd like to bring up is the maximum height, not dealing with 4 stories, but when I met with Nick and Noah, we had talked about 65 feet, and I had gotten that from John Householder, our commercial plans reviewer, that an average story or a liberal or conservative, depending on your interpretation of the word, 15 feet per story. And so that's where I came up with 65 feet. And then penthouses, and not penthouse who live in, but a mechanical penthouse is exempt from height. When David and Gary and I had met this past week and talked about it, that obviously we don't have an issue with this building because of their anticipated design, but a good example is an indoor theater or somebody that has a very large, in essence, a 2-story mezzanine that's still only 1 story because it's just 1 story, then we have 3 stories on top of that yet. And that we probably should establish a 8-foot maximum height, and because you guys were a little worried because if you went with a pitched roof versus a flat roof, that 70 feet would probably be a good height to go with. But one of the other things is we talked about we really need to establish a minimum numbers of stories to 2 stories. Can't remember which one of you all said it, but we don't want this to turn into just another strip shopping center type thing, and 2 stories would preclude that and would encourage the employment center, but also with the retail, that it would just be a way for a strip shopping center. It's like, oh, I'm gonna go here because we don't have outdoor sales and we don't have all these other things that we have listed. But then if you have 2 stories, it's not gonna be your typical strip shopping center type thing. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Get your thoughts on that, if you feel that's appropriate, not appropriate, what you think about that.
I like the idea of the height of the building. I think we can end up with something we're not intending to if we don't include that.
Any other thoughts? Do you guys have any thoughts?
No, I think it's a good idea to add an actual height on there. One of the things we talked about, and we've already discussed, just to make sure that you all did see it, is that we wanted to incorporate the mechanicals. A lot of times the mechanicals during the roof, they have to, they cannot be visible the way the C1 zoning, and I think some of the other zonings are today. But what we proposed to incorporate in this zoning was that not only is that they have to be shielded, but they have to be done in such a way that it's architecturally in keeping with the rest of the building. There are some instances in the town where somebody's effort to meet the requirement probably takes away, at least in my opinion, it definitely takes away from all the work that was done to architecturally design it in the first place. And this would alleviate that from happening.
Glad you brought that up with the HVAC units. Currently, our requirements for the screening of HVACs is that the HVAC unit should be screened with opaque materials. I'll read the exact wording actually. unit shall be screened with opaque materials and shall not be visible from adjacent properties of rights of way. One of the things that they've agreed to add, or that they suggested, it was their idea, is that the materials be compatible with the building. Do we want to include that in this section, or do we actually want to include that for everybody? I don't need an answer right now, but that's something to consider with regards to that across the board. Is that something we want all over? Are we satisfied with what we have generally, that they just be that they be opaque screens? But this particular one, which when you think about this being a 4-story building, you're like, on the roof, nobody's gonna see it, but when you look at their cross-section, yeah, you're gonna see it from Old Stage Hills because the elevation, that's a ridge right there. So their screening is very important on top of the roof. And when you have large structures like this, usually the HVAC units are on the roof. So that's just something for you to think about for next month to decide whether you want it in this or if you want that particular section of the ordinance amended.
Me personally, I'm very much in favor of trying to screen these with architectural elements of the building. And how we would do that is basically with the parapet of the building. So what we so often get is we get a lower parapet and then we get some makeshift screening. And sometimes even our unintended consequences, we've been guilty of doing that because you're trying to say, well, I want this HVAC unit to be behind this parapet. And so by designing this building and giving the tall enough parapets, which we generally think are about 5 to 7 feet above the roof line, and that's why when we put in a maximum height, we need to kind of keep that into consideration. But by having the taller parapets, you get one consistent screen all the way around the building that when your building's built, you already got your screening in place instead of having to come in after the fact. And I'm not going to pick on any particular building, but if you look around and you start seeing these strange things on top of buildings in the town of Farragut that look like big shipping containers, you're going, what are those shipping containers? Well, typically there's some screening that had to get put up there to comply with the ordinance. So I'm actually all on board with maybe changing this. I'm taking my applicant hat off, putting my commissioner hat back on, but maybe looking at maybe changing this for other zoning districts so we don't get some of these oddball screenings that we've had. So on the front end, the architect has to think about designing the screening into the structure of the building, and it's architecturally compatible with the building.
We actually have a situation that we're dealing with right now where the architect assured us that it was behind the parapet, and now they're having to go back and retrofit screening because
I had a note that I don't believe has been brought up tonight, but I think it's important. As we're talking about the screening and the architectural elements being part of the zoning, one of the positives of having a building moved up and you are parking, if you will, behind it, is you don't create a back. It was a challenge as we were designing this building, and as we looked down, okay, if we actually get to the point where we can build it, where are we going to put the mechanicals from an architectural standpoint? Where are we going to put these things? Where most buildings in town have a back that's shoved up against the back of the property, and it doesn't look good. Except for ours, it'll look good all the way around, I might add. But nevertheless, this would be the same thing, where it's architecturally pleasing all the way around it. That's why, for us, it was so important, and I just haven't noted, I didn't point out, that why we wanted to show you a rendering from every dimension, or every perspective, which I don't think anybody else does, because they don't want you to, quite honestly, see the back of their buildings.
In a building such as this, with the subdivision looking down on top, you very well may have to put some screening in some way. Just around may not be enough.
That's why we've implemented the tall parapets, and we've actually already done some sightline analysis that you can, unfortunately the folks at home aren't going to see it unless Ruth has that on an 8.5 by 11. But we've done some sightline analysis from basically the hill where the Renaissance is, which is the same hill that Old Stage Hills is on, and we've looked at that and determined at again, we're still kind of in the schematic design phase. We've really not got into that sort of nitty-gritty detail, because until we get past this step and we can convince our client that this is where they need to be, there's not any reason to necessarily get into, is it a 5-foot tall parapet or is it an 8-foot tall parapet? That's definitely something we've already started taking into consideration. You can kind of see it right here, Miss Betty, on this. These are the sidelines. This is the uppermost building at Renaissance, which is, we call it, it's the Elliott building, which basically sits on the same ridge where the Old Stage Hills. Now, Old Stage Hills is conceivably somewhat higher than some houses, but for the majority of the houses, they're at that elevation topographically or lower.
As you get closer to where you're talking about, this goes, well, it goes downhill as you get closer to where you're talking about the location of this building.
If you're wondering, what's on the opposite side of the street is the existing church. What most people don't realize is that the church that's on the opposite side of the street is actually taller than the 4-story building that we're proposing. Most people just don't put it in that type of perspective, and so that's why we did this type of cross-section analysis, so you can see where the existing buildings are at Renaissance, where this particular building would be, which is the one in the middle, and then where the church is across the street.
Chris, you know what, you do such a great job of explaining this. Talk about, we're going to go back to 2004, 2005, the concessions that we made with the Old Stage Hills in the buffer that we were required versus what we gave. Because I think there's a huge amount of space in there.
What Nick was alluding to is in the C1 zoning district. I'm going to try to get this so we can kind of get through our agenda tonight. But in the C1 district, you are required to do a minimum of 35 feet. And what we did is based on our entire southern property line, even actually where the O1 district is in Renaissance, there's 65 feet. Now, in the O1, it's platted as a 25-foot buffer and a 40-foot open space. In the C1, it's platted as a 35-foot buffer and a 30-foot open space. Well, what we did is actually allocated 65 feet against that entire southern boundary of Renaissance. And that was something we had a relationship with the folks, the then president of the homeowners association, and we kind of worked through some things and to address their needs. And if you look up there today, there's a huge buffer of very tall trees that are up there in that 65-foot area that is nearly double what was required, but is between the Old Stage Hills homeowners and us. So it just, and that's all Nick was pointing out. It was something. It was a very amicable relationship. We had a lot of support. I don't know if Ed remembers. We actually had folks that actually came out and said, "Hey, we like this project," which is not unusual for an adjacent homeowner association to come out for any kind of project. But it was something because they looked at what we had done and what we were proposing. They said, "Hey, this is a great plan."
Ruth, do you have any other points you'd like for us to be considering?
Yes, I do. The other thing that when I met with David and Gary, we talked about was to possibly consider discussing limiting the viewability of parking lots. That or to stay with our standard landscape ordinance as part of our chapter 4 of the zoning ordinance that requires so many shade trees, and it doesn't necessarily require any kind of buffer along the road. So that was just something to throw out there also for you to think about.
Personally, for us, we support some landscaping. And you can see even on the empty out parcels that we have at Renaissance, we've gone through and created islands of landscaping with understory trees and shrubs and pampas grass and some flowering shrubs. So personally, I like the idea of having landscaping between an adjacent right-of-way, because again, this all goes back to when I said we want to de-emphasize the parking lot and emphasize the building. To me, having some landscaping in there de-emphasizes the parking lot. How to quantify that may be a little bit tougher to try to put it in words, but maybe that's something you could say de-emphasize the parking lot through the use of landscaping, and then let the staff and the DRB work through that. There's ways you can do it with berms. I'm not personally a big fan of berms. The berms at Willow Creek look great, but they look great because of one thing. Willow Creek has reel mowers, R-E-E-L mowers. If you try to mow berms with a traditional mower, you will ruin the berms by scalping them. So berms for us is not necessarily a good use of it, but personally, because our building is formal in nature, I can visualize a hedge that is manicured like an English garden hedge. But for other people, they may want something that's maybe a little more natural with interspersed viburnum and some crepe myrtles and some other things, and that's okay too. But so personally, I guess in the interest of kind of getting some dialogue going, even though this is grass, keep in mind you're seeing a lot of green because we haven't gone through the cost and the time to do our full landscaping plan. I would like some landscaping between the parking lot and the adjacent right-of-ways. Above and beyond the grass. So I'm kind of along the same line where Ruth is, but I think there's multiple ways to do it. What we don't want to do is we don't want somebody to throw up a 6-foot stockade fence as an effort to screen the parking lot. I think that ruins it. And that's been done in the town of Farragut as a screen. It's not necessarily the best way to do it. I think you could, if there's a way that Ruth could craft some language in this zoning ordinance that would give the VRB some flexibility to determine the intent, to make sure the intent of the ordinance is met, I think that's probably the best way to go. But whether or not the rest of the planning commission is comfortable with that, I don't know.
Well, I think by doing something like that, people would sense instead of pulling into a parking lot, they're pulling into a park. And there's a difference. If I had to come up with some verbiage, I think that's what you're really summarizing, that's kind of what you're saying.
Yes, sir.
Any more points, Ruth?
One of the other ones was the dealing with the development shall incorporate a minimum of one of the following low-impact development practices. I had on there permeable pavers for parking. When we had met, we talked about that going with any parking in excess of the minimum required would have to be permeable pavers. Then if you're dealing with a development where they have one extra parking, it really doesn't meet the intent. And so figured to establish a percentage, and what I had emailed Nick and Noah earlier, I had thrown out like 25%. Noah said, 25% is probably a reasonable percentage for permeable pavers, if that is the option that you choose, because there's a list of options to choose from, that's kind of a good percentage. So what are your thoughts on that?
Is that is there any need to meet any stormwater requirements?
In this particular site, no, there isn't. They over-detain on their upper portion of their development because they dealt with a bunch of pass-through water. So because their detention basin is actually uphill from here. So they're actually not required to detain anything on this site in particular. So this may not be an option that they would choose. They may choose one of the other things, because even though they may not have to deal with stormwater detention, they still have to deal with water quality. And they do like the stream that was shown on the overhead there. cost would make you want to
Is there anything
concentrate?
that is from language we need to think about?
I wouldn't think so. What do you think, Mark? I don't think so.
I'm just not familiar with how to specify.
I mean, I just from a developer's standpoint, I would assume they would put it in the front door. I mean, you know, it's expensive.
I agree. They
So
actually, they look,
if I'm gonna do that, which was one of the things we actually like, we'd probably do that irrespective if you had to do it or not, just because it looks so good. I'd put it right there in front.
You know, I actually had the same question Ed had, I'd recommend that we put that in, that it should, the 25% number, I like that number. I would require that to be adjacent to the building, because about the time we make an assumption, you know, my intent is here, about the time we make an assumption somebody's gonna do it that way,
somebody will come up with, Ron, let me throw it all the way out in the, at the end of the parking lot.
they'll go, well, we comply.
Let me point out one time where it might not make sense. And Ruth, you may want to jump in on this one. If you were going to sheet flow off of, and you were going to drain everything to one side, obviously you'd want to put it on that side. Ruth, would you?
I agree. I think you need to leave the flexibility, and I'll use this site as an example, is that obviously everything's draining toward the creek in this location, and so optimally, the best place to put permeable pavers would really be these parking spaces along through here, because you should never design a building to be water toward your building, just, you know, on the, in case you're building something.
Common sense.
Yeah, you wanna drain the water away from the building, so in this particular case, you know, actually the south side does make more sense just from a drainage standpoint. I like how the pavers look myself, so it's kinda like, you know, that would, they talked about if they were to do the pavers, that, you know, do the driveway itself in asphalt, and just parking spaces and pavers and everything, so I think you wanna create flexibility for the designer as to what makes the most sense in that particular case.
So at the end of the day, you want the water to go to the permeable pavers, because they do a great job of slowing it down and cleaning it up.
You also got to think that this zoning, if you have a developer who comes along and their goal is to put up the cheapest thing that they want, this is not what they're at. Ask for. This is so incredibly expensive.
I do agree.
The architecture, everything we've talked about tonight, this is not the zoning, the first one they're gonna pull out. But if they wanna have some creativity in site design and do something a little bit outside the box, well, there's gonna be a lot of hoops they gotta jump through that's not required in our other ordinances.
Well, I still have some concerns, but you have, your points I can't argue. I just know, and we've heard this before, you alluded to a little bit, some other issues, and sometimes if we leave it too loose, we end up with something that we didn't want. But I do understand the point you made, so I'm comfortable after you. Thanks for sharing with me, I appreciate it.
Now, those are my primary points. What I plan on doing is I'm going to put a draft ordinance together. I don't think we're ready for a vote yet, because I truly do want you all to do your homework for the next month. Feel comfortable with what we're talking about. Because as I said earlier, this is about what the vision you see for Farragut. It's not about staff making a recommendation. This is going, you've done really well tonight with analyzing this and coming up with some good ideas. So I want to put a draft ordinance together based on tonight's discussion, and it will include the lighting ordinance amendment as part of the discussion, requiring the lower mounted height, and talk about the HVAC, you know, architecturally compatible across the board, or just in the zoning district, whichever. And then we can fine tune that at the next meeting so that we're ready for a vote at the November planning commission.
So we need to discuss item number 6, discussion request to rezone parcel 63 tax map 151 located on the southwest corner of Kingston Pike and Way Station Trail, part of the Renaissance development from C1 to a 4-story commercial zoning district. Myers Brothers holding applicant.
Well, we've kind of talked about that.
We
So I don't really know if there's much more that I want to say about this one.
talk about just a little bit about the fact that we are rezoning and the difference of that one and the request to amend.
Basically, this will run through simultaneously, in that the reading for the, I have to think about this one, because the legality is the other ordinance isn't legally effective until 10 days after publishing. So we might not actually be able to have first and second reading this until after the reading, that they're one reading behind.
Subject to is kind of what we've talked about, it'd be
Yeah.
contingent upon,
Yeah,
obviously.
But anyway, the idea is to run it through concurrently, the legal part of it, I'll let one decide on that one. But the idea is that we're creating an ordinance, and that this is the little first location that's going to be considered for. And that, I always, have given, you've all heard my warnings, this doesn't apply to this particular instance, but in this particular instance, the first place you're going to be applying it to, so you have to take that into consideration.
I guess I'll just kind of explain a little bit of why we're doing those concurrently and why we asked to do it that we can. As a lot of projects are, this is a project that's been in the works for a very, very long time. With that said, our client is at the point now where they need to know whether this can be built here or do they go to their other site. They do need to be out of their space, and so there is a time constraint. Obviously, we still have to design it. We have a lot of expenses that they don't want to do if we can't put it here. But yet they want to be in it very, very quickly. So there is time constraints. That's why we've asked to concurrently create the zoning district and then to rezone.
Question.
Yes, sir.
You may not want your to be delivered. Still competing for.
Oh, absolutely.
Preferred site.
Oh, no.
This doesn't go through.
Oh, no, no, I can tell you that if I can put that building on that lot, pretty much what they've asked for, they will do that. That is where they want to go. But they also understand that there's time that it takes and they have a cost because they do need to, they gotta make a plan and they gotta know what they're gonna do. So they clearly have, no, you're fine, that's fine. They clearly have a plan B outside of Knox County.
So Ruth, you have everything that you need from us?
Do you remember?
You said all you want to say?
Yes, ma'am.
You want to make a minute for this?
Well, thank you for coming.
Appreciate the opportunity to be with you.
What about accessories, structures?
She's going to come over with,
I'm
oh, I'm sorry, right, I'm about to do that. Item number 7, discussion on amendment to the Farragut zoning ordinance, chapter 4, section I, accessory structures to rename to accessory structures in use.
This is actually, remember a few months ago, we went through and we had gone through all of our Board of Zoning Appeals minutes and clarified some things with the Board of Zoning Appeals. Now we're just trying to keep up to date with what the BZA has acted on for clarification purposes. And this is what this is. In July of 2012, just a few months ago, Danny Kirby submitted a request to the Board of Zoning Appeals for an administrative review of the town staff's application of the requirement. Sound familiar? We just talked about screening. Screening of HVAC units at the Farragut Public Market. The applicant contended that staff was not correct in requiring that the HVAC units be screened. And the Board of Zoning Appeals ruled that the staff did not err in the application of the zoning ordinance in this regard and that the HVAC units were required to be screened. Part of the argument that Mr. Kirby made was that an HVAC unit is not an accessory structure, it is accessory use. And the argument and the title of this section is called accessory structures, and so therefore with it. And if I included in your packet, that chapter, and it says, it is the intent of this section to establish development requirements specific to accessory structures. Of course, I will add accessory structures and uses to that. And in light of our discussion tonight with regards to whether we want to amend D2, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and mechanical units, such units shall be screened with opaque materials and shall not be visible from adjacent properties and rights of way. If we want to make them architecturally compatible, do we want to amend this section, or do we want to make it just applicable to the new business district 4-story one? I'll prepare the ordinance for next time, but I won't bring it for a vote. I will still have it on for a workshop so that rather than amending this section and later amending it again, do it all at once, because there isn't a huge rush for this particular amendment. It's just something that we wanted to clarify to carry out what the Board of Zoning Appeals had ruled at the July PCA meeting. So that's all right, that's good.
I think we should add the architect.
You think it should be in this section?
Yeah.
I see some general nodding, okay, I will do that.
Then that will cover everything.
Yes, that will be, everybody will have to comply with that, not just the business district 4-story.
So, is that all of that? Any other questions or comments?
I still won't bring it for a vote next time, because I think it would be good to take it simultaneously through, because it kind of ties in with what they're wanting to do, and like I said, this is staff initiated, so it isn't a rush, so we'll still, I'll have the ordinance ready, but I won't take it for a vote.
And will the lighting aspect that we discussed be?
I will bring that also as a workshop session, and I'll have an ordinance prepared, and, I was thinking of 15 feet, because that seems to be about a standard height that I have seen. Noah, you're in construction, Ed, you've dealt with plans enough, what are your all's thoughts on that?
15 feet makes a lot of sense.
I was thinking of 15 to 17 feet. You get any higher than that, and you really do have the problem of what we got the complaints about on Parkside Drive, that it ends up being, because we have a maximum mounting height of a pole light, but, our poles, but it's like, if we have it on the building, we didn't have a maximum height. It wasn't an issue when we had shorter buildings.
Right.
But that still is, for safety purposes, it's still, that number works.
Yes, it does, because for safety purposes with lighting, really what creates more of a safety issue is when you have really bright hot spots and then really dark spots, so that you create a shadowing. And as we age, our eyes don't adjust as well when we go from light to dark, so that when you're going, if you have a really hot spot, like underneath the canopy, that banks ATMs is a good example. We don't regulate what that is, but, because we regulate it at the periphery, we give them that flexibility. If you have it really, really bright under there, and you look off, you can't see that there's someone moving in the shadows, because it's a max to min ratio that's really important. And then also in parking lots, you don't want a situation where you have really bright lights, and then it creates a lot of shadows in cars or next to cars, and people can be lurking and things like that. So the idea is really to have more of a monotone, but that's, just kind of a even lighting rather than really dark or, really bright. The even lighting creates a more safe situation than a really bright light creates a safe situation.
Your training you did on lighting several years ago still sticks with me with the safety issue, which is not something from a personal standpoint, from automobiles, that sort of standpoint, but I never really thought about it from a personal safety standpoint. So your training works.
Good.
Bruce, I'm a little late with this comment or question. With the 4-story building, is that a problem with the fire department?
No, it's not. when the town incorporated, that was one of the main reasons why we had the shorter buildings, was because we did not have the firefighting capabilities. We do have the firefighting capabilities at that, and, one of the things that, we also would require the building to be sprinklered and built with non-combustible materials, which, that doesn't mean brick on the exterior, that means don't build it with sticks in the interior. So, yes, that is not a problem.
Item number 8, public hearing on proposed location for new utilities.
There are none tonight.
The October the 18th, 2012 meeting is adjourned.